on air.
I'm Sean Yao.
And I'm Quintin Pastrana.
You're now in the loop, and these are today's top stories. Emperador seals a deal to buy Spain's Fundador brandy for almost 14 billion pesos.
$41 billion so far in climate financing commitments as 140 leaders convene and take climate change very seriously.
And the Philippine Stock Exchange gets 2 more weeks to complete regulators' requirements to take over the bond exchange.
And the Bloomberg intelligence report says it's TPP or bust for the Philippines.
The Securities and Exchange Commission gave the local bourse another 2 weeks to complete requirements before it lets the PSE acquire the Philippine dealing system. Quintin, why is this taking so long? What are the snags?
Well, let's talk about how long it's going to take. First of all, this initiative started in 2013. They were expected to wrap this up in 2014, but again, regulatory issues and the concerns by the main regulator SEC are just hounding this. But again, PSE, to their credit, has been mopping up a lot of the details, trying to line everything up. And the thing to remember is what they want is to go beyond this 20% cap on the limit in owning the PDS. The Securities Regulation Code says that no institution can own more than 20%. So they're asking effectively the SEC to give them an exemption from this cap so that they can control majority, which is around 60%.
How is that coming along?
Well, that's not coming along too well because they've queued it up. They've actually done nice negotiations with the current shareholders to agree it, and they're doing it through share purchase agreements. And so far, most of the ones they've talked to have agreed. Now, what's missing though is a plan to talk about the plan to talk about what they're going to do once they merge. Are there going to be concerns about the anti-monopolistic issues that happens when you concentrate too much power in a bourse?
Especially with the new competition law in place.
Absolutely, and it takes 60 days. I think the PDS issue is going to take around 60 days once they submit an operations and business plan. So again, it'll take them 15 days, so 60 days, so basically roughly around 3 months perhaps for this to happen. Plus you have the holidays to factor in. Now, this is the strategy of PSE. They basically try to build on the 21% share by going to different minority shareholders. And that's the Bankers Association of the Philippines, Phoenix, Worcester Capital, Insular Investments, and such. And that's supposed to give them the threshold of the 60 plus 1%. They've actually also spoken to San Miguel and Golden Astra Capital for around 5%, just enough to hedge to make sure that they have enough control. That, I think, is in the bag. The problem is, though, those warrants or those SPAs, they expired last Friday. So as a strategy, while waiting for this thing to happen, and while it takes them a while to get their specific business plan to the SEC, and for the SEC to now review this for those 3 months I was telling you about, they've got to convince the shareholders to execute extensions on these share purchase agreements. I mean, that's an internal arrangement. Again, not much to report, but that's the inside skinny of how it's going to take and how long it's going to take before this thing gets done.
Okay, well, I guess we'll talk about it again in 3 months, maybe a little bit more. Meanwhile, Philippine insurers expect a record year for revenues. Premium income is expected to hit 230 billion to 240 billion pesos by year end. This is driven by rising demand and new products in the market, and that's higher than last year's, or rather 2013's 189.1 billion pesos.
For the first 3 quarters alone, we have already posted a record premium income for both life and non-life industry. As I have said, will be a banner year, the best year ever for the insurance industry.
Pledges for climate finance programs have reached $41 billion in the first 2 days of the Paris climate talks. More nations and development banks are ready to be giving these pledges until the summit's conclusion on December 11. President Aquino, for his part, committed action versus climate change if the financial support is given.
This year alone, about 5% of our total budget was allocated for climate change. Furthermore, just this October, the Philippines submitted its intended nationally determined contributions, or INDC, committing our country to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions conditionally by 70% by 2030. We are ready to do our part if other nations demonstrate support in terms of finance, technology development, and capacity building. Today, the Philippines, with the rest of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, a group that will soon grow to represent at least 1 billion people, makes our case. In the name of all our citizens, we ask you to give our proposal for more climate financing for developing countries the consideration it deserves.
New commitments to reduce climate change are in the works during the Conference of Parties in Paris. Caroline Hyde has the story.
The first day of the United Nations Climate Change Summit, and history has been made. The largest collection of world leaders in one place at one time. More than 140 coming to Le Bourget. The leader of China, the world's biggest polluter, helping drive momentum. Xi Jinping with new commitments to help reduce climate change come 2020. Meeting with President Obama, of course, the second biggest emitter, seeing how they can come together and build a new agreement to reduce climate change and ensure that world temperatures do not rise above 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Now the world leaders have done their part and the hard work gets going. We have to see how a compromise is made and an agreement signed by 195 countries who are meeting in Paris to help form what will be the new agenda across the world for climate change. And of course, private money being put to work as well. Bill Gates, the wealthiest man in the world, working with other philanthropists, Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Ma, to help sponsor new clean energy technology as well. That's Caroline Hyde from Le Bourget, Bloomberg Television.
Here's a quick look now at regional headlines. Honda employees in Japan can stay with the company a little longer. The car maker extended retirement to 65 years old from 60. Japanese companies have been feeling the country's aging population. Currently, over 61% of Japanese are 65 years and older. And in China, the thick smog blanketing Beijing shows no sign of abating today. Factories were forced to shut down temporarily. Officials expect air quality to improve tomorrow. And after Paris and Russia bombed ISIS targets in Syria, the UK is preparing to join the fray. Prime Minister David Cameron will call a Commons vote on Wednesday to decide whether the country will launch airstrikes against the militants or not. About 100 opposition parliament members are expected to back Cameron's plan. And that's our roundup of our regional headlines.
When we return, it's the brandy deal of the year. Emperador acquiring Spain's Fundador.